In this video, I'm going to cover the use of 3 different types of jabs you need to know about. The jab is the most important and the most versatile strike in your arsenal. The jab is used to set up your other strikes. It can be used defensively as a way to disrupt counters, and it could be used offensively by itself, solo, to gauge distance, to set up the pace, and to dictate the entire fight. Now, in the fundamental full course, we covered only one type of jab, which was a snapping jab. But there are 2 other types of jabs you need to be aware of and you need to begin to implement into your training, into your drilling, into your sparring. So the 3 jabs are pawing jab, the snapping jab, and a power jab or a stiff jab. So I'm going to break each of these down, show you how to throw them and what they're used for, and we'll go through all 3 jabs so you are aware of them so you can begin to implement them. The first type of jab is a pawing jab. So a pawing jab is simply putting your jab out there and keeping it out there in order to block your opponent's vision, and most importantly, it's used to set up your other shot to the body, cross, overhand, whatever. Its primary use is to disrupt, to annoy, to block their vision, and to set up your power shot right behind it. So with this jab, you're not going to be throwing your jab in order to hit. You're just going to be putting your jab out there to play with the hands. It's used to gauge distance as well as to set up your other shots. So you're just gonna keep your jab out here, stick right in their face, maybe play with their hands, grab their hands in order to create an opening. And that's the key. You're not throwing the jab, you're keeping the jab out there, messing around with the hands, blocking their vision, waiting for them to react in some way to create an opening so you can deliver a power shot right behind it. When you are trying to drill this, either shadow boxing or in the bag, taking your hand out here and just keeping it out here, just touching, and as soon as you see an opening, as soon as they react in some way, either by you blocking their vision so they cannot see a punch coming, or they start to kind of being focused more on hand and they react in some way that you see an opening, then you deliver your power shot right behind it. So that's what a pawing jab is. Just playing around, keeping the jab out there, playing with their hands, blocking their vision, annoying, and just seeing their reaction. The key to this though, you've got to be very careful. A lot of guys, they just throw the pawing jab and that's all they do. And they have nothing behind it. They're not setting it up. So they're just simply coming over here and just touching, playing with the hands without any intention, throwing something behind it. And that gets you in trouble, because if you don't actually set something up or you create a reaction in order to follow up with another strike, all you're doing is you're opening yourself up. So it's a very dangerous punch unless you know how to use it properly. And the way you do it is to remember, you are gauging a reaction and creating an opening. You're opening them up, trying to make them react, blocking their vision, but the entire thing is watching very closely to make them react, to open themselves up so you can deliver a shot right behind it, either a cross or a cross hook, whatever. The intention behind this is always to gauge distance and then make them react so you can set up your power shot. And the pawing jab is not something that you begin learning as a beginner. It's something that you are introduced to a little later, once you kind of got used to the other 2 jabs, which is a snapping jab and then a power jab. Pawing jab is a great jab to use, but it's not your first strike that you learn. It's something you introduce after you've got to know and mastered the snapping jab, which is next. The second type of jab is a snapping jab. Now, the snapping jab is actually the first strike you'll learn as a beginner, and the snapping jab is all about speed, snap, and it has to sting. As soon as the jab comes out, it needs to come back in, and it has to be fast. That's why it's called the snapping jab. You throw it out there with speed, and you gotta snap it and bring it back. You gotta cause damage with it. When it hits, it needs to sting. Now, this is the jab that we'll cover in detail in the fundamental full course. So the entire video is about half an hour of going through that detail of body mechanics, of throwing the snapping jab, and how to deliver it with speed, and how to keep your body mechanics in play so you properly throw the jab and then bring it back. But here, in terms of just these 3 jabs, the snapping jab is probably going to be your most widely used jab and the one you always tend to throw, and then you're going to introduce the power jab and the pawing jab later. So the snapping jab needs to be your first jab you learn. And remember, the snapping jab is all about speed and the snap behind it. Now also with the snapping jab, you use the snapping jab to set up your other shots, of course. You know, you can use your snapping jab in order to set up your cross, your body shot, or other combinations, you know, cross, hook, whatever else you throw after. So you also use this jab, just like the pawing jab, to set up other strikes. However, the snapping jab can be used solo by itself and just dictate the entire fight. You can just use it by itself the entire time and just you keep landing and you cause damage with it. Unlike the pawing jab, where the pawing jab does nothing other than to set up something else right behind it. But the snapping jab can be used solo, and of course it's also used as a setup shot for other strikes. So if you've never drilled a jab before and you're just getting started, focus on the snapping jab first before you introduce the pawing jab and the next strike, which is going to be the power jab. The third type of jab is a power jab, or also called a stiff jab. This jab is all about power behind it. So of course it can be thrown fast, but the intention behind this power jab is to almost throw it as a KO punch, almost like if you are throwing a cross or a hook with power. The jab could also be thrown with power as well. Now this power jab tends to be a little slower because you're not stinging with it. It's not a snapping jab. You're not bringing it back in order to set something up or just being very fast with it. The power jab, you have to, when you throw your power jab, you have to rotate more of your body into that shot. So it's going to be a little slower in the way you throw it, but it's going to cause more damage. With the power jab or stiff jab, the power comes from the rotation of the upper body and the hips. So when you throw a snapping jab, you know, you can throw just with the hand and the shoulder and a slight twist of the upper body, just a little bit. That way you can be fast with it and bring it back. With a power jab, you have to rotate and you have to drive through with that jab a lot more because you have to deliver more power behind it. And of course, as you know, in most of my videos that I've talked about, you generate the power from the hips, from the legs to the hips to the upper body, and then you drive through with the hand right through the target. So on the power jab, you have to rotate and you have to drive through your target. For doing this on the bag, you have to deliver it with intention to damage and intention to KO and just have, you know, make them stumble back. When you're drilling this on the bag, you got to put all of your weight and all of your drive through the bag and make it into a power stiff jab. Sometimes you may need to step in a little bit in order to generate more power. So you can see me here, I was stepping in. That gives you a little bit more of the rotation and the body behind it. Or you can throw it right from your stance. You just have to rotate your hips and your upper body a little bit more than you would on the snapping jab. Now the way you would throw the snapping jab in the fight or in sparring is a lot of times you could land one or two just by throwing it alone, but sometimes you have to set it up with other strikes. You have to set it up with your snapping jab, with a pawing jab, maybe a cross, maybe other strikes, and then you deliver periodically whenever you see an opening right through your target with that power jab. So you got to set it up and you got to introduce a few things, a few strikes here and there in order for you to land your power jab, because with a snapping jab you could probably throw that and just move around and hit most of the time if you're fast with it. With a power jab, again, it requires a lot of energy and you telegraph it because it's a power shot. So it's a lot easier to see and evade or counter if that's all you do. So you gotta be able to sprinkle that jab, that power jab, in between other combinations and other setups. So that's the important part. So these are your 3 jabs you need to begin to implement into your drilling, into your sparring. So remember, if you are just beginning, make sure you start with the snap and jab first. If you haven't, and you need to know how to throw it properly with all the body mechanics in play, and how to generate speed behind it, and where to keep your hands, how to throw it from your fight stance, take a look at the course in Fundamental 4. I go into detail about how to begin to execute the snap and jab. So that's your first one you need to focus on before you begin to apply the other 2. Then you introduce the other 2. The Pawing Jab to set up your other strikes, make him distracted, see openings so you can deliver, and of course the power shot, the power jab. So focus on the first one, snap and jab, get really good with it, then introduce the power and the Pawing Jab.